I was about 12 or 13 at the time this happened, so pretty young. My mum had asked me to run across the street to the Sobeys, which is a grocery store in Canada, and pick her up her favourite ice cream while she popped in the shower. This is normal for us. I'd go out and get it for her all the time. It was legitimately right beside my house. I just had to turn down a very short sidewalk that led to an intersection, and it was on the other side of that intersection. It took me about 3 minutes to walk there. Anyway, when I got to the intersection to cross, there was a gentleman on the opposite side waiting for the walk sign to come on. He was tall, darker skinned, and had a stone-cold look on his face. The light walk came on, and we both started crossing. When we were about to pass each other, he made eye contact with me, so I smiled at him. He didn't smile back, but just stared at me the whole time he passed me. It made me super uneasy inside, and I don't know why, but I felt compelled to turn around and see if he was still staring at me. He was. The entire time he'd crossed the road, he stared back at me, not smiling. I quickly turned around and kept walking to the store, and I didn't look back. I tried to put it out of my mind, and chalked it up to him being a douche canoe. When I was finished and walked back to the crosswalk, or the intersection, I noticed that the same man was still there. He was sitting on a wooden planter box under a sign for the gas station that was right there, and he was staring at me. I felt a chill run through me, but in my naive 13-year-old mind, maybe he was waiting for someone. I felt uncomfortable enough to not cross the section that would lead me to him. I would still need to cross to that side, but I was going to try to go around it. Sorry if I'm not explaining this right. Anyway, when he noticed this, he immediately got up and waited for the walk sign to turn on so he could cross and get to the other side where I would be. Luckily, I'm a fast walker, so I got to the other side first, and decided to jaywalk instead of waiting for the next walk sign. He didn't speed up, but he ended up right behind me on that short little sidewalk that led to my house, give or take a few feet. I was extremely uncomfortable at this point, and kinda scared. He was this big, dark, sinister, unfriendly looking man who had seemingly been waiting for me, and now, he was right behind me. The way that the street is set up is that when you turn onto it, there are 3 visitor parking spots on each side. I turned onto my street and ducked behind a car. I wasn't even really sure why. I didn't know for sure that he was following me. I just knew that I felt uneasy. He walked by my street very slowly, but never turned his gaze. When he was about to go completely out of sight, I got up and started walking down to my house, thinking I was in the clear, and that was just me being silly. I'm about the 4th or 5th house in, so it was close. Boy, was I wrong. He must have realised he couldn't see me anywhere else on the street, so the only logical explanation was I had turned already. So he walked back. He saw me just as I was getting into my house, and then turned down the street. At this point, I was terrified, and I didn't care if it was in my head and I looked silly, but I ran. I ran up the steps to the front door of my house, tears racing down my face. I tried to open the door, and it was locked. My heart dropped. I didn't bring my key, and I had locked the door because I didn't want to leave it unlocked while my mum was showering. I was worried someone would hurt her while I was out. I started pounding on the door, just straight screaming for my mum. I could barely see my door anymore as my eyes were so cloudy with tears. I turned around to check on the man, and he was coming up my driveway. I screamed the loudest, blood-curdling scream I could muster, and at that point, my mum opened the door. I pushed her inside and slammed the door and locked it twice. I was in hysterics and ran to the window to look for the man, who I could now see taking off down the street. I told my mum what happened and she consoled me. She was supposed to work an overnight that night, but didn't want to leave me alone after that, even though it was just down the street. Nothing really came from it. My mum knew I was spooked and paid special attention to me for the next little while, and I always carry a key with me now. Looking back though, I didn't learn my lesson. I still smile at strangers. But to that creepy guy who followed me home, let's not meet again. My memory is a bit fuzzy on this, but I'll try to remember it as best I can. This story happened to me in my peaceful neighbourhood in my very, very small home country. Literally a dot on the world map in the Middle East. I lived in a nice and cosy kind of house with friendly neighbours, so I never felt unsafe going out. I'm a guy, and I was around 9 or 10 years old when this happened, so I was pretty dumb. On a nice sunny day, I decided to go out and take a walk around the compound, or play basketball with my friend if he was home, and was done with his homework. I saw a pickup truck filled with foreigners in it. I don't remember what they looked like, but I just remember that they weren't from my country. I walked by the truck and smiled and waved at them because I'd never seen them here and wanted to make them feel welcome. But none of them smiled or waved back. There were about 4 of them in the back and 2 in the driver's side. Or 2 in the back and 2 in the front side. I'm not really sure about it, but that's not relevant to the story. They were wearing button shirts and jeans, with some wearing normal shirts and some wearing jackets. And I assumed they were workers, because this is what most workers in my area drove and wore. But I was a little weirded out that they didn't have any company with them, because all the workers I had seen had company vehicles, not self-owned vehicles. But I just thought they were all self-employed. I stepped into the playground area and walked around. Then I entered the soccer field and walked around a bit there, and was saddened because none of my friends were there. My uncle's house was connected to a field by a big fence, so I just climbed in from the back and went in to get a Coke. My uncle would let me do this because he was a really cool guy. I drank most of my Coke and threw it away, and then I left the house and started heading towards my house. I was a bit surprised to see that the men in the truck hadn't moved, because I'd been gone for a while, but I just shook it off. As I was leaving, I smiled and waved at the men again, because I was a little kid who didn't pick up any red flags from them. This time though, the driver grinned at me. It was a very creepy grin, and not a friendly one. So I just waved some more and kept walking towards my house. When I got to my driveway, I heard the truck's engine start, and there were no other cars around. And that's about when I started picking up all the red flags those guys had been giving off. I got inside and locked the door behind me just in case they were following me, and then went to the kitchen and started looking out the window. My kitchen had those weird windows where they were all blurry, and after a few minutes, I saw through the blurry window something with the shape of a truck arrive and start driving around the neighbourhood. This was a very small neighbourhood, so I was very creeped out, and I slowly started walking up the stairs, and when I was in the clear, I ran to my room to hide. After a while I told myself it was safe and decided to go back outside because I was sure they were gone and wanted to play. I know, stupid, but I was a little kid. I started to walk towards my friend's house that was near the playground. I then heard a car driving down where my house was, and I decided to book it to one of the hideouts that the compound kids would hang out at, because I didn't want to check to see if that was the truck that was following me. This hideout was an old house that wasn't being used by anyone. It had a small wooden garage out front, and a big garden, so you can see why us kids loved it. I looked out for a small hole in the garage, and my instincts were correct. It was the truck. Now, till this point, I was telling myself that I was probably being paranoid, but now I knew that these guys were looking for me. They stopped at every house that was near that area of the compound for about a minute. I presumed checking for me. Then they moved on to the next one. I quickly hid behind a bush and looked through the leaves, and when I looked up, I was so fucking relieved. There was a worker there, standing on the top of the wall doing something to the house that was directly near this one, and he was wearing a hard hat and holding a hammer. When the men stopped by my hideout, they saw me hiding behind the bush, and the driver looked at me in the eyes and opened the door. I was frozen still, and about to scream for the worker to come help me. And then one of the men noticed the worker, and said something in a language that wasn't English or Arabic, so I didn't understand it. But I presume it was a warning that there was someone there. The man then spat on the ground. The cops weren't advanced enough to check DNA at the time. And after spitting, he got in his truck and closed the door very hard, and said something in that same language that I didn't understand, and sped off. I was frozen still at the time, with my eyes wide open, and after a few minutes, I ran off towards my house. I never told anyone except for my sister, who I was very close to because she was my only sibling. So, scary men in their old truck, fuck you for ruining my innocence, and fuck you for showing me how bad people can be. When I was about 8 years old, my mother and I lived in a small town, in a building with apartments and rooms that people could rent, live in, or leave whenever. My mother was super poor, so it was all we could afford. A tiny apartment with neighbours changing every week. My then best friend Cassandra, who was also 8 years old, used to come to spend the night every Saturday. We would usually go play in the long corridors of the building, in the same floor as our apartment, and if it wasn't cold or rainy, we'd go out into the parking lot to play. That's what we did that day, but my mother didn't like it when we weren't close to her, so after 10 minutes of playing, I told Cassandra we should get back in before we got into trouble. Just as I was opening the entrance door to the building with my keys, some tall thin man in his 30s. I couldn't remember much of him, but he definitely didn't give off the creepy paedophile vibe. But he literally appeared out of nowhere from behind us to hold the door for us. We thanked him, obviously thinking nothing of it. I never saw him before, but like I said, anyone could rent and leave, even if it was for one day. So it wasn't weird to see someone that I wasn't used to seeing around. He kept smiling and started talking to us and following us to the elevator. He was genuinely smiling, like he was so happy to see us and to talk to us. As we waited for the elevator to come, he kept asking us questions like, what floor do you live on? What's your name and age? How long have you known each other for? Just random questions, to which we responded truthfully. We went in the elevator. He pressed on floor 2 and I pressed on floor 4. When the door of the elevator closed, he started getting creepier. He told us how pretty we were, how he liked our hair, how it was perfect that I was dark-haired and my friend blonde. He told me that I seemed to have a really nice body, how nice I was tall and slender. This didn't come across as weird or creepy to my 8-year-old brain, because a very friendly old female neighbour that used to live next to us always told me how I should model for kids' clothes, and she used to say she wished she had my body when she was younger. So him giving me compliments about my body wasn't a red flag, so I smiled and thanked him. Floor 2 was his floor. The elevator opens and he prevents the doors from closing again. No one was around. Now I was starting to think that he was being a bit weird. He told us that he worked for TV and he was a photographer for magazines. He said he was quite reputed and that he dealt with models, celebrities, etc. He said that he thinks we have potential, and that's why he complimented us. He said he thought we'd make it big if he took pictures and videos of us, that we'd be on magazines and on TV. He said he'd take pictures of us in bikinis and cute little dresses. My friend was excited about it, and I was too, but for some reason, I was very skeptical. He told us to follow him to his room, and we'd see how he wasn't bullshitting us, that he'd show us his professional camera, and he said he was used to taking pictures of kids, and that he made some of them very popular. He said he had candies and toys that we could keep. I said that I should talk to my mother first, and he said, "No, don't tell your parents. Parents want you to stay in school. Only tell them after I've took the pictures and videos of you two, and when your parents see them and you become popular, they'll be okay with it." That's exactly what he said. I remember every single word, and I'm 23 years old now. The whole "I've made kids popular before, your parents will see you in pictures and videos, and you'll be on TV and magazines" thing sounds very creepy and sinister now that I know what he was actually on about. Before I could say anything else, my friend walked out of the elevator and told me to come, and he was grinning at me and said, "Come on, it would be a shame if your friend got famous and not you." And we ended up following him to his room because of my friend. I didn't think it was right to just leave her. His room was down a long-ass corridor. How convenient that was, that it was so far from the elevator and stairs. He opened his room and there was a camera on a tripod in the middle of the room in front of the bed. There were toys, mostly girl toys and stuffed animals on the desk next to the bed. At that moment, I thought he was actually telling the truth, but as I was looking around, and as I glanced at him, grinning, like he'd just won the jackpot and gesturing us to get in, I had a really bad feeling, and my guts told me to leave right then. I didn't know what a paedophile was then. I didn't even think about him possibly wanting to hurt us or touch us. I just knew that something was off and listened to my guts. And so, without saying anything, I grabbed my friend's hand and started to back away, saying that my mother is probably worried about us and we should be home by now. He didn't say anything. We walked back, and you know when you're walking in a dark corridor or somewhere else at night and you feel like something is going to grab you from behind and you get goosebumps? That's exactly how I felt. And so as soon as I heard his steps following behind us, I started running, without even warning my friend. Obviously she started running too, and I slammed the door to the stairs open, and in the corner of my eyes, I could see him coming after us. I literally jumped on the stairs until floor 4 with my friend, asking me why I was running, and saying that I was freaking her out. He stopped running after us as soon as we reached the stairs. We banged on my apartment door and slammed it shut right behind us when my mother opened it. We told her everything. What floor he was on, the number of the room, and everything he told us. She called the police, and when they came to have a chat with him, they found the door open, with nothing and no one inside. From that day on, I wasn't allowed to play outside or in the corridor anymore, and my mother got super paranoid and overprotective with me. We moved apartment. Then a year later we moved somewhere else. I never saw or heard from that man again. Seriously, people, always trust your guts. If you feel like you should run and get away from someone, don't think about it twice. God knows what would have happened if we went inside his room. Well, anyway guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like, share and subscribe if you haven't already. If you would like to read the stories for yourself, there will be links in the description to each of the stories. Also, if you have any stories of your own which you would like to have shared, then please make sure to contact me. Link in the description, and you may be featured in a future video. Well, anyway, I hope to see you soon, and I'll speak to you later.